Since you guys liked the last video on failed car brands, today we're looking at specific cars that failed over the years. From Pontiac's SUV that looked like a science project gone wrong to Cadillac's attempt at making a luxury Chevy Cavalier. Starting with the Pontiac Aztek. When most people think of General Motors, they picture reliable family sedans, powerful muscle cars, or maybe those iconic Corvettes that grace every suburban dad's midlife crisis fantasy. But in the year 2000, Pontiac decided to throw all conventional wisdom out the window and create what can only be described as automotive modern art gone horribly wrong. The Aztek began its life as GM's ambitious attempt to capture the growing crossover SUV market with something they called a sport recreational vehicle. The design team apparently looked at a minivan, squinted really hard, and decided what it needed was more plastic cladding and the aesthetic sensibilities of a refrigerator that had been dropped down a flight of stairs. Built on the same platform as the Pontiac Montana minivan, the Aztek was supposed to be the cool, outdoorsy alternative that would attract younger buyers who wanted utility without the soccer mom stigma. What they got instead was a vehicle that looked like it had been assembled by committee in a windowless room where nobody was allowed to say no to any idea, no matter how terrible. Today, the Aztek has achieved something truly remarkable. It's become so legendarily awful that it's actually gained a cult following, thanks largely to its starring role in Breaking Bad, where it served as the perfect metaphor for Walter White's increasingly desperate circumstances. The Aztek has transformed from automotive punchline to pop culture icon. Values have started climbing for clean examples, proving that sometimes being memorably bad is better than being forgettably mediocre. The irony is that underneath all that controversial plastic bodywork, the Aztek was actually a decent vehicle with good reliability, clever storage solutions, and surprising versatility. But when your car looks like a transformer that gave up halfway through transforming, most people never get past the visual assault to discover its practical merits. DeLorean DMC-12. John DeLorean was already a legend in the automotive world, having created the Pontiac GTO and risen through the ranks at General Motors before deciding he could do better on his own. The man had vision, charisma, and the kind of confidence that could convince investors to dump millions into a startup car company in the late 1970s. His dream was to build the ultimate sports car, something that would combine European styling, American engineering, and futuristic materials into a vehicle that would make Ferrari and Porsche look like yesterday's news. The DeLorean Motor Company set up shop in Belfast, Northern Ireland, partly because the British government was offering massive incentives to bring jobs to the troubled region. The DMC-12 featured gull-wing doors, a stainless steel body that would never rust, and a design that looked like it had driven straight out of a science fiction movie. Unfortunately, the execution fell far short of the ambitious vision. The workforce was inexperienced, quality control was practically non-existent, and the car's performance was underwhelming despite its exotic appearance. With just 130 horsepower from its rear-mounted V6 engine, the DMC-12 needed over 10 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour, making it slower than most family sedans of the era. Today, the DeLorean enjoys immortality thanks to its starring role as the time machine in Back to the Future, which transformed it from commercial failure to cultural icon. The stainless steel body that showed every fingerprint and was nearly impossible to repair has become part of its charm. Original DMC-12s now command serious money from collectors, proving that sometimes the best marketing campaign is a Hollywood trilogy. Several companies have attempted to revive the DeLorean brand over the years, with the current DeLorean Motor Company offering restored originals and promising new electric versions that may or may not actually materialize. The DMC-12 remains the perfect example of how a spectacular failure can become more famous than most successes. Chevrolet SSR. General Motors has always had a complicated relationship with retro styling, but nothing prepared the world for the SSR, which stood for Super Sport Roadster, but probably should have stood for Seriously Strange Result. This was Chevrolet's attempt to create a pickup truck that was also a convertible sports car, because apparently someone in Detroit looked at the declining sales of both pickup trucks and convertibles in the early 2000s and thought, you know what this market needs? A vehicle that combines the worst aspects of both categories. The SSR began life as a concept car that generated surprisingly positive reactions at auto shows, leading GM to greenlight production despite the fact that nobody could quite figure out who would actually buy such a thing. Built on a modified GM T360 platform shared with the Chevrolet Trailblazer, the SSR featured retro styling that was supposed to evoke memories of classic Chevrolet trucks from the 1940s and 1950s. The result was a vehicle that looked like a Hot Wheels car that had been scaled up to full size, complete with a folding hardtop that took up most of the tiny truck bed when lowered. The SSR's identity crisis was evident from day one. It was too expensive to appeal to actual truck buyers, too impractical for sports car enthusiasts, and too weird for just about everyone else. Today, the SSR has found its niche as a curiosity piece for collectors who appreciate its uniqueness even if they can't quite explain its purpose. Values have remained relatively stable, though nowhere near the stratospheric prices of more conventional professional collectibles. The SSR represents everything that was both right and wrong with GM's design philosophy in the early 2000s, when the company was willing to take risks but couldn't quite execute them in a way that made sense to consumers. It's the automotive equivalent of a mullet, business in the front, party in the back, and questionable judgment throughout. Chrysler PT Cruiser. Chrysler was desperately searching for relevance in the late 1990s when they decided to bet big on retro styling with the PT Cruiser, a vehicle that was supposed to capture the spirit of classic American hot rods while providing modern practicality and reliability. The PT stood for personal transport, though most people assumed it meant something else entirely, usually involving words that weren't suitable for family conversation. The design team, led by Brian Nesbitt, created something that looked like a 1930s sedan that had been put through a photocopier and enlarged with bulbous proportions and chrome accents that were supposed to evoke nostalgia for America's automotive golden age. Built on the Neon platform and powered by a variety of four-cylinder engines, the PT Cruiser was marketed as everything from a small wagon to a lifestyle vehicle to a sports car, depending on which trim level you chose and how creative the marketing department was feeling that particular day. The PT Cruiser became an unexpected sales success initially, attracting buyers who wanted something different from the sea of anonymous sedans that dominated American roads. Chrysler couldn't build them fast enough in the early years, with dealers adding markups and waiting lists stretching for months, but success turned to infamy as quickly as the PT's reputation for reliability crumbled. Today, the PT Cruiser has become the automotive equivalent of a participation trophy, instantly recognizable and universally mocked. These vehicles depreciated faster than ice cream melts in Arizona, making them affordable transportation for people who either don't care what others think or have given up on life entirely. The PT Cruiser spawned countless internet memes and became shorthand for questionable automotive taste, though a small but dedicated group of enthusiasts has kept the performance variants alive on the used car market. It's the car that launched 1,000 jokes about soccer moms having midlife crises, and somehow that's become its greatest legacy. Ford Edsel. Ford Motor Company was riding high in the mid-1950s, flush with post-war prosperity and confidence that they could do no wrong in the American automotive market. The company decided they needed a new brand to fill the gap between their entry-level Ford models and their premium Mercury lineup, targeting buyers who were climbing the social ladder and wanted something more prestigious than a Ford but couldn't quite afford a Lincoln. After years of research, market studies, and focus groups, Ford invested over $400 million in developing what they called the E-car, eventually named the Edsel after Henry Ford's son. The Edsel was supposed to represent everything advanced about American automotive technology, featuring push-button transmission controls, self-adjusting brakes, and styling that Ford's designers believed would define the future of automobile design. The most distinctive feature was the vertical grille that Ford called a horse collar, though critics immediately compared it to everything from a toilet seat to female anatomy, neither of which helped sales. The Edsel launched in September 1957 with tremendous fanfare and marketing hype, but it immediately became clear that Ford had misread the market completely. The timing was terrible, arriving just as the American economy was entering a recession and consumer tastes were shifting away from the flashy, oversized vehicles that had defined the 1950s. Today, the Edsel has become synonymous with spectacular commercial failure, though it's also gained recognition as a fascinating piece of automotive history. The name Edsel entered the American vocabulary as shorthand for any product that fails, despite massive investment and marketing support. Surviving examples have become collectible, not because they're particularly good cars, but because they represent such a perfect storm of corporate hubris, poor timing, and design miscalculation. The Edsel's failure taught the automotive industry valuable lessons about market research, consumer psychology, and the dangers of believing your own hype, making it one of the most studied failures in business history. Cadillac Cimarron. When you think of Cadillac, you picture luxury, prestige, and vehicles that scream, "I've made it in life," from every chrome-laden surface. You think of massive sedans with names like DeVille and Eldorado, cars so opulent they practically came with their own zip codes. But in 1982, General Motors decided that what the world really needed was a Cadillac for people who couldn't quite afford a real Cadillac, which resulted in one of the most embarrassing badge engineering exercises in automotive history. The Cimarron was GM's desperate attempt to compete with European luxury compacts like the BMW 3 Series and Mercedes 190e, vehicles that were redefining what luxury meant for a younger, more affluent demographic. Instead of developing a proper luxury compact from the ground up, GM took the cheapest possible route and slapped Cadillac badges on a Chevrolet Cavalier, added some fake wood trim, and called it a day. The base model came with a wheezing 88 horsepower four-cylinder engine that made about as much power as a determined hamster on a wheel, ensuring that acceleration was more of a theoretical concept than an actual experience. Even with later V6 options, the Cimarron never felt like anything more than what it was, an economy car wearing a tuxedo to a black tie event. Today, the Cimarron is remembered as the car that almost killed Cadillac's reputation entirely, teaching an entire generation of luxury buyers that the wreath and crest meant absolutely nothing if the company wasn't willing to back it up with actual engineering and quality. Finding a Cimarron today is like discovering a unicorn, not because they're valuable, but because most owners were so embarrassed they drove them into the ground or traded them in as quickly as possible. The few survivors serve as rolling reminders of what happens when accountants are allowed to make design decisions and why brand integrity matters more than short-term profit margins. Lincoln Blackwood. Lincoln has always struggled with identity, trying to figure out whether it wanted to be American Rolls-Royce or just Ford with better leather. But nothing encapsulated this confusion quite like the Blackwood, a luxury pickup truck that was about as practical as a chocolate teapot and twice as expensive. This was Lincoln's attempt to capture the luxury truck market that was supposedly emerging in the early 2000s, targeting successful contractors who wanted to haul their tools in style and suburban cowboys who needed to tow their boats while maintaining their country club membership status. Built on the same platform as the Ford F-150, the Blackwood featured a carpeted truck bed with a tonneau cover that couldn't be removed, making it about as useful for actual truck work as a Ferrari would be for moving furniture. The bed was lined with stainless steel and featured a tailgate that cost more to replace than most people's entire vehicles, creating a luxury truck that was terrified of getting dirty and completely defeated the purpose of owning a truck in the first place. Lincoln managed to sell exactly 3,356 Blackwoods during its single year of production, making it one of the shortest-lived vehicles in automotive history and proving that sometimes market research can be spectacularly wrong about what people actually want. Today, the Blackwood has achieved a sort of cult status among automotive oddity collectors, representing the pinnacle of Detroit's ability to completely misunderstand its own customers. Values have remained surprisingly stable, and not because the trucks are particularly good, but because they're so rare that finding one feels like discovering buried treasure, assuming that treasure was a luxury pickup truck that was afraid of getting its hands dirty. The Blackwood serves as a perfect metaphor for early 2000s excess when automakers thought they could put luxury badges on anything and charge premium prices, regardless of whether it made any practical sense. Suzuki X90. Suzuki built its American reputation on practical, reliable vehicles like the Swift and the rugged Samurai, creating economical transportation that could handle anything from city commutes to mountain trails without breaking either the bank or your spirit. But in 1995, someone at Suzuki apparently looked at the automotive landscape and decided what the world desperately needed was a two-seat convertible SUV that looked like a Tonka toy that had been left in the sun too long, resulting in the X90, a vehicle so confused about its purpose that it made the Pontiac Aztek look focused by comparison. The X90 was Suzuki's attempt to create a fun, sporty alternative to traditional SUVs, combining the off-road capability of the Sidekick with the open-air experience of a convertible and the practicality of absolutely nothing useful whatsoever. Built on a shortened Sidekick platform, with a removable T-top and styling that suggested the design team had been heavily influenced by children's playground equipment, the X90 featured seating for exactly 2 people and cargo space that couldn't accommodate a decent-sized grocery run, let alone the outdoor gear that its rugged appearance seemed to promise. The marketing department struggled to explain exactly who would buy such a vehicle, settling on vague references to lifestyle-oriented consumers and adventure seekers, which translated roughly to people who make questionable decisions and have very specific storage needs. Today, the X90 has become something of a cult classic among automotive enthusiasts who appreciate its unapologetic weirdness and complete rejection of conventional wisdom. Values have actually increased slightly over the years, not because they're particularly good vehicles, but because they're so wonderfully strange that owning one is like having a conversation starter parked in your driveway. The X90 represents everything that was both right and wrong with 1990s automotive design, when manufacturers were willing to take chances on bizarre concepts but couldn't quite figure out how to make them work in the real world. It's the automotive equivalent of a mullet haircut, completely impractical but somehow endearing in its commitment to being different. AMC Pacer. American Motors Corporation spent most of its existence trying to prove that being small and independent was actually an advantage in an industry dominated by the big three, creating innovative vehicles that offered something different from the cookie-cutter offerings of Ford, GM, and Chrysler. But in 1975, AMC decided to take their contrarian philosophy to its logical extreme with the Pacer, a wide-body compact car that looked like a fishbowl on wheels and promised to revolutionize personal transportation through the radical concept of being wider than it was long. The Pacer was supposed to be AMC's answer to changing consumer preferences and federal safety regulations, featuring a passenger compartment that prioritized visibility and interior space over conventional proportions or aesthetic sensibilities. Originally designed around a rotary engine that never materialized, the Pacer ended up up with AMC's straight six engine, creating a vehicle that was underpowered, overweight, and shaped like a doorstop that had been designed by someone who had never actually seen a car before. The asymmetrical door design, with a longer passenger door to improve rear seat access, made the Pacer instantly recognizable, but also ensured that it would never be mistaken for anything approaching normal automotive design. Today, the Pacer is remembered as one of the most distinctive failures in automotive history, a vehicle so unusual that it transcended mere transportation to become a cultural phenomenon. Thanks to its starring role in Wayne's World and its association with 1970s excess, the Pacer has achieved a level of fame that its commercial success never warranted. Surviving examples are sought after by collectors who appreciate its unique place in automotive history, though values remain modest because nostalgia can only overcome so many fundamental design flaws. The Pacer represents AMC's greatest strength and weakness, their willingness to think outside the box combined with their complete inability to figure out what consumers actually wanted inside that box. So there you have it, a greatest hits album nobody asked for. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more. Let me know what car topic you want me to cover next, and I'll see you in the next one.